Hey guys, Chairman here, back with another rather special, rather spicy deck profile for you today. Now, I was given the inspiration for this deck from a deck I played at Locals in Card Arena on Friday. And this player played against me round 1. And while he didn't win, his deck was just so unique, so interesting, that I was like, wow, there's no way that deck works. And it just somehow worked. Like, you know, I could not believe just that his deck was functional. Honestly, it just took me by surprise. You know, I went home, just started brainstorming, and then was able to come up with a deck roughly based off of his idea, and was like started testing it, and oh my gosh, this deck is so fun. This is probably one of the most fun decks I've ever built in White Sharks. It is very fun, mostly for you, not for your opponent, but definitely a very creative deck, and I'm really excited to get to show it off. Also, it doesn't have any double rares, which is really cool. So, without further ado, I will present to you 8-2 Soul Azur Lane. That's right, we are playing 8-2 Souls, 4 from the Union trial deck and 4 from the Sakura trial deck. These only come in trial decks, and they're not 2 souls from the actual booster. Yeah, there's actually 4 in each color. Red, yellow, green, and blue. We are playing the green and blue ones for the purpose of this deck. Now, you may be wondering, well, these don't combo with anything, right? So you're playing a deck with 8 climaxes and no climax combos. How in the world are you going to get your resources? How are you going to get your field and your hand and all that stuff? Well, this deck, because it doesn't run a climax combo, utilizes 3 different 2-card combos to kind of give its game plan from 0 to level 3. And it's really interesting how these 3 combos actually kind of work off each other, and it's really cool how this all comes together. So the first 2-card combo is at level 0. It is going to be the Fuso Yamashiro combo. So 4 copies of the level 0 Fuso and 4 copies of the level 0 Yamashiro. Now, as you can see, Yamashiro is a vanilla. That means she has no effects. She's just 3k power. So Fuso has all the effects and is the important card here. So Fuso gives all your Yamashiros plus 1000 power and plus 1 soul. Additionally, if you have Yamashiro in the front row, your Fuso will also gain 3000 power and plus 1 soul. So if you have one of each character, then both of them are 2 soul attackers. The Fuso will be 3500 and the Yamashiro will be 4000. The final effect of the Fuso is when you play her from hand, you may discard a ship to search a Yamashiro from your deck and add it to your hand. So yeah, basically once you get the Fuso, you can get the Yamashiro. You play both of them. They're both big. They both swing for 2 soul, and that's basically your level 0 game plan. What I love about this specific combo, not only is it, you know, you're able to search the other card without paying any stock, but they're also very big. So even though you're swinging for a very high number of damage, if your opponent cancels, then they have to contend with these very beefy beaters. And if they don't cancel, well, then you just shot them straight to level 1, which is pretty good. The second 2-card combo is going to be at level 1 with the Soryu Hiryu combo. These rabbits, how fitting for the first video of the Year of the Rabbit to be made with a deck with these rabbits. So both of them have the effect to summon each other on play. So when you play the Hiryu, you can pay 1 to summon the Soryu from deck, and when you play the Soryu, you can pay 1 to summon the Hiryu from deck. And then when the other character is on the board, they both gain 3500 power, and they each gain an additional effect. Soryu gains the ability to on attack pump another character by 1000, and Hiryu gains like this weird encore thing where like if she gets reversed during your opponent's turn, you can ditch a character. Oh, actually, you can just ditch a card. That's interesting. Okay, you can ditch a card, and then she rests herself, but then at the end of your turn, she just kills herself. But it's kind of useful if, like, say they can't answer both your Soryu and Hiryu, you can save your Hiryu, and then if you have another Soryu, then basically you get their power conditions again on your turn. What this allows us to do is just spam the board with 7k bodies at level 1 for a pretty efficient cost. It's pay 1 stock, and yeah, so again, these aren't attacking for very high numbers. They're just 1 soul, but they are very big, and so we can pump them up with 2 soul, swing for a large damage, and your opponent still has to contest with 7k beaters. They're not very likely going to be able to answer every single column of attackers, so you're likely get to keep 1 or 2, and then on the following turn you can summon them out again, or you can go back to your Fuso Yamashiro to get more bodies. So yeah, basically just spam the board, pretty nice combo at level 1. Another thing I will note about both of these, the Fuso and the Soryu Hiru, is that they're searching and summoning from the deck. And this is really good first deck because, you know, in first deck, that's when our deck compression is the worst. And that's when we have the least access to mill. And so this deck doesn't really mill a lot, but because it searches from the deck, we basically can fish out all our pieces pretty easily. And we also get to thin our deck out of clean cards, which really helps this deck in the first deck rotation. It's surprisingly a lot, right? Because it's better than milling. We're actually just fishing clean cards out of the deck. So that's really good. All right, at level 2, our game plan is Stephen Potter. She is a 2/1, 8,500 vanilla. That's right, she's a vanilla. Now, some of you guys may be thinking, there is another 2/1, 8,500 vanilla that we all are very familiar with on this channel. I wonder if Stephen Potter is anything similar. And you would be shocked to find out that she actually is very similar to another 2/1, 8,500 vanilla that we all know. And when the botch is placed on the board, she does hit that magical 16,500 power. That's right, she is Pah-chin at home, except blonde and kind of cute. All right, so Botch has all the effects. We'll go over her effects. There's only 2 of them this time. The first effect is for each copy of Botch, she gives Stephen Potter the effect gain 2,000 power for each of your opponent's back row. And so, of course, if your opponent has 2 back row, that's 4,000 power. And if you have 2 Botch, that's 8,000 power, bringing Stephen Potter up to the 16,500. Now, obviously, your opponent can just push up back row to decrease her power, but that's pretty good, actually, because nowadays, modern decks generate a lot of resources, and they usually want to have maximum resource efficiency, which means a full hand and a full board. By forcing them to not use their back row, you're basically forcing them to discard extra cards from their hand. That's already still pretty good. The second effect of Bosch is once per turn, when you play a Stephen Potter, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a ship, you can add it to your hand. And this procs for each Bosch you have on the field, which means that if you have 2, then you just reveal the top 2 cards of your deck. And if they're both ships, well, you get to add both of them to your hand. That's right, she's Stephen Potter of Greed. You can just draw 2 cards. Now, obviously, if you reveal a climax, that kind of sucks, but there's ways that this deck gets around that. But yeah, for the most part, the idea of this deck at level 2 is you play 2 Botch, you play a Stephen Potter, you draw 2 cards, you get a 16,500 body, and your opponent just looks at you and goes, what the heck? Yeah, and that's it. That's your game plan. That's how you get all your resources. This is enough for you to last all the way to level 3. And continually slamming 2 souls in your opponent's face. That's the name of the game. And for our end game, well, because we're not running any climax combo based finishers, we're just running a bunch of off finishers, which Azur Lane has plenty of really good ones. And so starting off, we're playing 4 copies of the Azuma. I like Azuma best in this deck because of how big our Stephen Potters get at level 2, meaning that our opponents are likely to leave open lanes, which means the Azuma gets to direct and burn with her ability pretty easily without having to bounce. She does have the experience 8 to bounce 2 cards, which we do try to get to in this deck, but if we don't get to it, you know, Stephen Potter still is able to clear up those lanes for us. Next, we are running 2 copies of Hakuryu. This is the burn 2, which is tied to the experience 8, which yeah, well, definitely we still want to get that experience 8. On attack, pay 3, ditch 1, burn 2. But she's also a stock healer, and she's the only healer in this deck, so that's also why we kind of need to see her. And both Azuma and Hakuryu burn for small increments, which helps when we're ahead, as this deck is very often ahead because we're slamming so much 2 souls and triggering so many 2 souls. So yeah, so when we try to close it out, usually we just want small instances of damage. But when we're behind, that's when our third finisher really comes in handy, which is Kronstadt. And she is the restander. You need a full board, and you also need to sack a character on board, which means it's very hard to do multiple unless you're building a deck specifically tailored to do multiple using some kind of encore effect. In this deck, however, we're just really aiming to have 1 restand Kronstadt, and then the other 2 are just for experience requirement. Kronstadt is our comeback mechanic. If we're really far behind, she can potentially trigger a 2 soul, or we can play a 2 soul to give her a lot of soul, and then she can swing for big numbers and, you know, potentially sack a win out of nowhere. Another option you can run at level 3 is the, I don't know what the ship's name is, but it's the Fumio. Shuffle back cards from your opponent's waiting room into their deck. I do think it's very good in this kind of deck because of we just don't have any outs to compression. If your opponent's compressed, that's our best shot at getting damage in. However, the problem with this deck is that we don't have too much selectivity, so I would rather double up on a lot of the endgame rather than spread it out and have just like a bunch of endgame, but not be able to really control which pieces we get. So you can experiment with that. I think it's totally reasonable to like maybe cut an Azuma and cut a Kronstadt to add 2 copies of like the Fumia or something like that. But yeah, anyways, but the whole idea is that our endgame, we run a lot of it so that we can level it for experience and then just play whatever we draw. And rounding out the deck, we are playing some utility cards, the most important of which is 4 copies of Deutschland. And Deutschland is a level 0 Brainstorm. She is a tap 2 Brainstorm, and she also gives front 1000 to our level 0s, which pairs perfectly with the Fuso Yamashiro game plan. If we have Deutschland and Fuso on the board, we are presenting a 5000 beater 2 soul threat, a 4500 beater 2 soul threat, and on the following turn, of course, we have the Deutschland to help us brainstorm and get the missing pieces we need. I think one thing that's really cool about all these 2-card combos in this deck is that because of Bosch and also because one of the 2-card combos is level 0, we actually just naturally have a lot of level 0s in this deck, which means the deck's early game plan is very consistent, and it's also very big. So this deck actually just has a good curve. I think other decks that are like focused on these 2-card combos have to like give up some level, but this deck is actually just really strong and presents very formidable boards all throughout the game, and Deutschland definitely helps out with that. The second thing that Deutschland is really important is for our Stephen Potter turns. So generally speaking, when we reveal a climax with Stephen Potter, Deutschland is a way for us to turn that into a quick plus. And even when we don't reveal a climax with Stephen Potter, well, we've just revealed 2 clean cards, which means that the Brainstorm 5 is even more likely to hit than not. So generally speaking, what I will have is I will have Deutschland and a Botch in my back row, and then a Botch and a Stephen Potter in my hand. And at level 2, I'll play the second Botch, I'll move the Botch to back row, Deutschland to front row, I'll play the Stephen Potter, and then no matter if I reveal a climax or not, I'll just Brainstorm 5. And that basically gets to fill up my hand again. I'll probably search out a Stephen Potter for the following turn. And then that Stephen Potter lives, and we can play the Stephen Potter the following turn. That just basically sets us up for the rest of the game. Deutschland is really good for that. And having multiple copies means we can also just draw into multiple of her. Play her down at multiple times during the game. Like even once we're set up with like the Potters, we can still put her down, tap our Botch back rows to Brainstorm 2. Pretty good. Yeah, definitely the best Brainstorm in this deck. Alright, and then finally, utility slots. We're playing 2 copies of Reno. Reno's just really good. Drop salvage, gives us access to the waiting room. Also gives us top deck information, which can be important for, say, Stephen Potter or for the Kronstadt restand, so we know what triggers we're triggering. And she also just gets power if we hit a ship. And along with the Deutschland, she can swing for 5000 power at level 0, which is really good. So yeah, definitely really, really strong level 0. And we're also playing 2 copies of Albacore for our drop search option. There's the Jean Bart, which is a level 0. But I like Albacore better because, well, she is blue and we do need a bit of more blue in this deck. But she also is a double filter. Her second effect is on play. If you have 2 or more other ship, you can draw 1 and discard 1. And so she basically gets to get rid of 2 useless cards in our hand for a draw and a search, and that's just really good, especially since we don't really have that much utility elsewhere. This is one of those decks where you hand this to like a new Weiss player and they're like, where are my climax combos? How does this deck do anything? But then when you put this in front of an experienced player who understands just like how to play the game and how to like min-max, you just watch them do magic with this deck. Like you never run out of hand. You can play a 2-soul every single turn. Your compression is surprisingly good because you're on a search, tap 2 Brainstormer, and all your like 2-card combos are like filtering clean cards out of your deck. And then your endgame is just surprisingly decent because the top end of Azure Lane is just really good off climax finishers. And so yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing this deck a lot. Not obviously like competitively, because it's definitely, you know, shy of being a very competitive viable deck, but this deck is definitely a great deck to kind of stomp around locals with, just kind of flex a bit. Also just to teach people about the game, right? Because this is a deck that isn't focused on like doing fancy combos or doing stuff. It's just all about synergy and like very careful resource management. So I think this is like definitely a great deck to like, if you can play this deck well, then that means that you're pretty good at Weiss and you really understand kind of how Weiss works and like compression and all that good stuff. So yeah, definitely really looking forward to playing this deck. Really looking forward to foiling out my Stephen Potters because that foil looks great. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Azure Lane honestly has been an incredible set to theory craft and build because there is no one singular best deck, there's just so many options because the card pool is huge. I'm having a lot of time, theory crafting and deck building. So expect a lot more Azur content on this channel. Actually, I do have 1 or 2 maybe more deck profiles that I would love to share from this truly amazing set. I wasn't originally going to get into this set, but I'm pretty invested at this point. So yeah, hopefully this gives you some inspiration for your own Azur Lane builds or your own crazy, wacky, creative builds. Yeah, and just yeah, keep having fun with this game, dude. This is just really, really fun. Anyways, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys. Peace.